You're live. So take it from here, Ben. Thanks.
I'll just play a little bit of music just to kind of get us into it, and then We'll start with what we're going to explore today. Hey everyone. So that was a tune of mine called Heart Lake, and that tune features it's not exclusively pentatonic scale, but a lot of the melody is from a thing called the pentatonic scale, which penta for five. As opposed to the seven note you have in like a major scale. The five notes in a pentatonic scale are what make up a lot of fiddle tunes and things like that. And that's something we're going to build to today and spend some time in one of the classes for Tunefox. But before we get to pentatonics, I want to talk about closed positions on the neck for where we would find really anything, whether we're talking about chords or scales or whatever. And the idea of a closed position is that you're fretting all the notes. So say you have something in the key of G. If you want it to be in the key of F, you could just move it down 2 frets and do the exact same thing, and it still works. So that's just an example of what I mean by closed position. And so it's handy if you're playing with the vocalist and maybe the voice is higher or lower than what you're used to. If you know closed positions, you can move up or down accordingly. And basically, I know we're going to probably go a little fast today. So if you have questions, do please jump in with questions. But what I want to introduce you to is this idea of there being 7 closed positions. And the way I like to think of them is based on the notes of the scale. So we'll be in the key of G. That's, banjo players, we love the key of G. And we're basically going to base every position off of each note of the scale. So let's start with the G note. If you go to the 5th fret on your 4th string, you'll find a G note there. And just think about your index being at that 5th fret. And we're going to think of this position as being all the way from the 5th fret to the 9th fret. So every position we look at is going to be about 5 frets like inside. So that's going to be one position. And we're defining it because the index finger on the lowest note would be grabbing the first note of the scale, that G note. So if we go up, so that's, and we'll fill it in later with how we play scales and chords. But just think of that as one position, the scales, that position there. So if we went to the next note in the G scale, we have that A note. So now we got index finger on that A, which is the 7th fret of the 4th string. So again, we're going to visualize another position here. So we could, this position we can think of like the 7th through 10th fret as being the core of the position, but every now and then it'll sometimes go down 1 fret, or maybe occasionally it'll go up 1 fret. But the core of it is going to be right in here. And then we'll just kind of continue that. So if we're building a G major scale, we had 1, 2, and then 3. So again, here's going to be a 3rd position, and it's going to be based on our index finger on the lowest note, playing the 3rd note of that G major scale. And so the core of the position is going to be like from the 9th fret to the 12th fret, but sometimes it'll go down to the 8th fret as well. And I think you guys get the concept here, how we're building it out. And eventually we'll find all these different positions to show you kind of how it might look like when you fill it in with scales. you might get a thing like this if you played a scale in each position. So we'd start. And you notice that when I played that, I never shifted out of position. I just stayed in that part of the neck. And I also kept going. Like I didn't stop at the highest note. I kept going to the top of the position. So I'm going as low in the position and as high as the position as I can, using notes in that G major scale. So, you know, we're going a little bit fast today because it's sort of a shorter lesson, but I'll play it one more time just a little slowly so you can see what I'm doing there for those notes. So on the fourth string, I put 3 notes on the fourth string. Then I played the same positions on the third string. I only played 1 note on the second string. And then I played those same 3 places on the first string. So anyway, that's what the G scale would be like in the first position. But if you moved it up here, we're still going to be playing a G scale. But instead of starting on the G note, we're going to be starting on the A note, but we're still doing the notes that are in the G major scale. So it'll sound like this. So I don't know if you guys get what I'm saying here. What I just played here doesn't sound like a G major scale, but those are all the notes in the G major scale. We're just not beginning and ending in the usual spots. But the nice thing about knowing that is that if you're ever playing a tune that's in the key of G, that's where you'll find all the notes that will fit in that key. So basically, I'll just kind of breeze through for a second so you get a sense of what there is to gain from learning these positions. So you'd have like... started there. So that would be, once you know that, then if you're playing in the key of G, you'd be able to access that G major scale anywhere on the neck. That's just a scale. I know, you know, a lot of banjo music we play, there's not really a need for us to play scales. So if you want to improvise, it's great to know your scales, but maybe in going to a jam, you're not going to use your scale. But what we do use all the time is our chords. Like all the time we're playing backup, playing chords. So you can do the same thing with these positions, but find how to play your chords. Okay, and I've got someone asking, do I have a tab with this on it? I do not today, but I will make tabs available for the content for the camp. Yeah. And by the way, I've been missing some of the chat questions. Let me see if other people have been asking questions here. Okay, it doesn't look like it. Well, yeah, let me stop actually. What questions do you all have based on that stuff so far? Feel free to either unmute and ask or write into the chat box. Okay, so tab would be helpful. Do I use the same fingering in all those positions? That's a really good question. So I slowed down the first position for you guys, which was like playing 3 notes on that string, 3 notes on the next string, then 1 note, and then 3 notes on the next string. So that formula of using 3, 3, 1, and 3, that is pretty much what I did for all those chord shapes. But you know, there's another way of doing it too, which fits within these shapes, which would be to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. If you go 3, 2, 2, and 3, that would also keep you within the position every time. So that's that is a thing about the left hand fingering. But of course, the shape will change for each place on the neck. So like how far apart, you know, your fingers are for each place on the neck, it is going to keep changing for every position you go through. As far as the right hand technique, the basics of it are thumb on down beats, index on up beats. So like thumb, index, thumb, index, thumb, index, thumb. But one thing I do a lot of is substitute the middle finger for either thumb or index. So if you ever substitute the middle finger, you're throwing it in there to make things easier for yourself, but then you just pick up where you left off. So like maybe you could go thumb, index, thumb, middle. You could do that, and then you'd be back to thumb again. So versus, so think of the middle as like a pinch hitter that you can just throw in to kind of provide some like relief for yourself at any point. Okay, so I see a lot of these questions here. Can I give an example of how you use this improvising over a song? Sure. Let's think of a good example. So like a song like Blackberry Blossom. So you guys might have seen that I was basically playing the melody, but then in that one spot, I started playing the melody in like one of those positions, and then eventually stopped playing the melody and just played other stuff using the scales. So scales are not really worth practicing for their own sake, but if you have an interest in improvising or have an interest in being able to play melodies in different keys and on different parts of the neck, learning the scale is a really great way to find the melody in those different places. So looking at questions here. Someone asked, are you just moving? Yeah, so there is this formula for how you find a scale. It's kind of hard to answer that question exactly, but in reply to Kenyon, who asked that question about whole steps and half steps, if you start on the lowest note of the scale, you're going to be playing. You know what? I think if I answer this question right now, it's going to be a little more complicated. But I promise we can dig in deeper when we're in the camp and we've got a little more time on our hands. This is just such a short lesson that would be kind of a big question to dive into. Let me jump ahead because I realize we're at all different skill levels here, and some people who are a little more advanced might want to kind of know where we're going with this, how to apply the pentatonic stuff to it. So basically, the next thing we're going to do is think about how you find your chords within each one of those positions. So like within the first position, what's a G chord? Does anybody know a G chord that you could play within this position between the 5th fret and the 9th fret? So I see somebody doing this shape. It's a shape that, a lot of the Scruggs style backup, you would play that. And you notice like right here, so that all fits within this span. So that would be a way of playing a G chord. Does anyone know a C chord that fits within this shape? Yeah, I think I see somebody doing this. If you put a bar with your index finger on the 5th fret, that's a C chord. So if we're thinking like, okay, this part of the neck, key of G, 1, 4, and then we can slide it up for that D chord, which is also called the 5 chord. And now we know how to play the typical, G, C, and D is sometimes called 1, 4, and 5. That's the most common chord progression in bluegrass and a lot of other American music. Now we know how to play that chord progression in this position of the neck. So the next thing we're going to do is go through each position and find how to do the same thing. So let's go to the next position. The next position was roughly 7 through 10. but also sometimes includes 1 fret lower, 1 fret higher. So where's a G chord that we can find there? Kind of a trick question. It's the same one we just did, right? Because that same G chord fits in both positions. It fit in the lower one, it also fits in this one. What about a C chord as part of the neck? It's that one that you would do in a lot of bluegrass, like scrub style backup right there. So G, C, and then for the D chord, we're going to use that bar again, because the bar is the one that's in that position of the neck. So basically, you would go through and figure out each of these positions, how are you going to play your chord? So 1, 4, 5, that's in that position here. If we went to this part of the neck shape, we have the G in the bar position up here, the 12th fret, maybe, and then, so the point is you can keep doing that. And this is a nice thing if you ever play songs that have a lot of chord changes and it's hard to keep track of all the chord changes. A great exercise is to figure out how to find whatever chord changes you want within a single position. And then you go through and find how to play them in all the different positions. And then at that point, you can just play anything you want to without ever shifting around on the neck. That makes it a little more manageable. Someone's asking, would one of the shapes be called an inverted chord? Yeah, there is a thing where like a chord where the lowest note is the name of the chord. Like this is a G chord and the lowest note is a G. That's called root position. But this one, it's also a G chord, but the lowest note is a B. That's called first inversion. So yeah, it's an inversion. And on banjo, we always are playing inversions all the time because it's not like a guitar where we've got these low bass strings we can grab all the time. We just use what we have. But let me get to the pentatonic thing. So basically, we talked about these positions on the neck. You can find your scales in those positions. You can find your chords within each of those positions. And then the pentatonic scale is a nice, very practical thing to know because so many melodies are based on the pentatonic scale. And that would just be another thing. So we did this whole G scale shape, but let's do a G pentatonic scale. It'll be like, let's see, we'll go, we're playing this position. So the 1, 2, 3, like before, the first 3 notes in that scale. Then we're going to skip to the 5th note. For the pentatonic scale, we'll skip to that 5th note. Then we're going to use our index finger for the 6th note. If you want to, you could use your pinky for that, but I prefer to use the index up here. Some of you who are into old time music might recognize that as the opening notes of a tune called Lost Girl. So 1, 2, 3, 5th note of the scale, 6th note of the scale, and then the 8th note of the same first note again. So that's the pentatonic scale. And we can finish it out in this part of the neck by going. So, excuse me. So a lot of tunes like Angelina Baker's in a different key, but pentatonic, Katie Hill, almost pentatonic. It has 1 extra note in there. But if you listen to David Grisman, he does a lot of licks that are like stuff like that. And basically, one of the things we'll spend time with in one of the classes this week is the different things you can do with the pentatonic in these different positions. And some of them are really handy where like you'll get 1 picking pattern in your right hand, and then you can just apply it throughout the neck, like. Like that kind of thing. I know this is a lot for today. I know for some people who are coming in who haven't been playing for as long, who haven't done closed position stuff, it's probably a little overwhelming to get all this content at once. But hopefully, this will give you all some things to work with. What questions do you all have for me?
Hey, Ben. That was great. Thank you. Yeah. And we will post the recording of this video on our blog, and I'll add some of the tab on there. I'll add a little bit of it so people get a taste. But if they want to learn more about this stuff, obviously you'll go more in depth in our classes at camp. And if anybody wants to sign up for camp, it's tunefox.com/camp. Sorry, I have a 3-year-old here playing with trucks outside on our porch, so that's why it's a little noisy. But we're so excited to have Ben teaching banjo, and BB Bowness also teaching banjo. Her open house session is today at 5:30, and up next we have Casey Campbell teaching mandolin. The dates for camp is May 15th through 17th, 2020, and like I said, it's tunefox.com/camp. Thank you, Ben, and thanks for everybody. Thanks to everybody for showing up.
I appreciate you guys. Everyone, be well. Take care.
Cool. See you, everybody.